I'm 65 years old. I have a organization that's called Discover Wholeness. And over there, we work with people who are having trouble uniting themselves with their spiritual self, where they feel separated from it. And as we all know, the media does a really good job at working on everybody's head and trying to get them programmed into things. And so what we do over there is help people regulate themselves to where they become normalized to their own heartbeat, their own rhythm, their own spirit, and learn to be quiet. So that's a bit about what I do. So what I would like to do is tell my story. And so in the beginning, I'm 65 years old. I was born in 1959. And I came into a family that was kind of wealthy sort of people. My father, when I was really small, had a Cadillac dealership, which I know I didn't tell you that. But I grew up in the car business. And then he went from that to having a chain of tropical fish stores, if you know what those are. And all really successful businesses. So because my parents had the kind of money where I could choose whatever I wanted to do as, a baby pretty much, I started to figure skate when I was 2. So, I'll never forget that. My mother took me to a rink and I stood on the corner, and it was a really interesting thing because as I was standing there, I just had this feeling of belonging. It's like I belonged there. And so I got really excited. Here I am, this tiny little Adam Miller, that's back when I had hair. And I got these skates. Now, I didn't know anything, right? I'd never been to a rink. I could barely walk at 2, much less, do anything like that until I stepped on the rink and I could stand on them. My mother was amazed. I was amazed. I mean, this is like 1963, right? So I was just a little thing. And maybe it was earlier, whatever. Anyway, it was somewhere in there. And I actually kind of scooted, around the rink. But within an hour, I started skating. And so my mother's like, I think we got something. So as time went by, I ended up taking lessons, believe it or not, like 5 days a week. Here I am, like a 4-year-old, taking figure skating lessons 5 days a week. And I did my first competition when I was about like 4.5 or something like that. And I won it. I was like, I went from nothing for 2 years later to, starting to win competitions. So I could see, even a tiny person like myself, I could see my destiny. I could see that figure skating was going to be what I was going to become. In the meantime, my father was kind of giving me garbage about that. And back in the early 60s, I'll put it this way, it wasn't exactly accepted that a male didn't do hockey. That all men should do hockey and that women did figure skating. So it was kind of this, I was at odds anyway. So this is the part of the story where I need to tell everybody that my father, the entire time from the time I was born, all through these years I'm going to talk about, just actually beat the hell out of me pretty much. So in total, by the time I was 15, I went to the hospital 35 times with, various injuries and so on and so forth. So as we go through this story, I'll skip some years here and say that a little bit later, when I was about 15 years old, I was fully into figure skating by then. So at that level, I could do double flip, double loop, double toe loop, double everything, which equals about 7 jumps in total. But I could do kind of an unusual thing. So I could do like a backflip, right? So at that time, people weren't doing that jump, right? So I was kind of like one of the first people that did this backflip. And I had this girlfriend who was at a party with me, and she didn't seem quite right. I mean, I'd known her for a couple of years, and like I said, I was 15. And so she came and she sat down with me, and she said, "Well, I've got to go." I'm like, "Go? Like, go where?" And she passed out. And I thought, well, people have to understand that in those 70s, 1970s, we were all a bunch of party animals. I mean, everybody went to parties, everybody got stoned, or whatever else. That's just the way of it in America. And I didn't really think anything of it until she didn't wake up. So this was about 15 minutes later, and she started to get cold. What is happening here? And she was dead. Yeah. So that was my first experience with anything that had to do with any kind of death, anything. People at 15 years old, especially over in America, we don't know anything about death, dying, or whatever. We don't know anything about that at all. And back in the 70s, being a teenager, it was like triple that. We just didn't, that wasn't a subject. Why would anybody talk about that? Long story short, with that death, it took me 3.5 hours for the police to actually get me to let go of the grip that I had on this girl. I just couldn't let go there. And I think this is a story about letting go. And it's a story about how we do have resilience, which is what your title is. And how do you cope, with that entirely? And it took me many, many years.
How does a 15-year-old deal with somebody that you cared for because she was your girlfriend?
Yeah.
Just dying. I mean, first of all, your girlfriend, somebody you care for, just disappearing, but then also a death in the family, probably one of the first ones you've experienced of somebody so close. So how does a 15-year-old deal with that?
So what happened after that is I went into this horrible depression. I mean, obviously. So my parents sent me to, a psychotherapist who deals with loss, right? I didn't go to a psychotherapist for death because that's a different type of psychotherapist. I went to a psychotherapist for loss. And that was really smart on their ability to do so, because what that person did is they got me to understand that we're in the body temporarily, which I didn't have any grip on. You have to keep in mind, here I am, just absolutely a hard-ass figure skater. I'm made out of titanium. I mean, I was doing 12 hours a day. I was doing 1,000 jumps in one day. So I didn't have any grip on how that works and how brittle we actually are, and how futile it is for people to think that they're always going to be here, that nothing's going to change, and that everything's okay. And I think that's the issue that a lot of people have right now. Okay, and that's why I'm going through the story. So after the psychotherapist, I had a pretty good idea that maybe I wasn't going to be as all-encompassing Mr. I'll explain it like this. So the other skaters that I skated with, they thought I was some kind of like skating god. Okay. Which means that I thought I was a skating god and I thought I was indestructible. But as this story progresses, everybody's going to find out I absolutely am not. It's amazing that I'm here at all. Okay. So that's how I got through that. So jump a few years ahead, and now I'm 18 years old, and I'm getting ready to go to major competition. And I was over skating. So it's kind of back to that hard ass stuff with figure skaters where you just think you can, I mean, the whole idea we used to have was no pain, no gain, right? So I think that says it all. And we live like that. And regardless of injury, I remember one time I was out doing jumps. It was like 4:30 in the morning or so. And I was up in the air going 25 miles an hour. So picture this, up in the air, 25 miles an hour, 6 feet in the air. That's the bottom of my feet, 6 feet up, right? I'm working on this triple jump. I went 1, 2.5 and hit the wall, right? So I hit the wall. I went over the wall. I broke my right ankle, dislocated my right shoulder, and broke my nose. You can see it. And you know what I did? I got back up. I went out and I had my coach yelling at me, don't worry about that. Do it again and just forget about this injury you just did. And you got to finish that session regardless of how you feel. It doesn't make any difference. How you feel, how much you broke, your nose is bleeding, stick a Kleenex in it and continue that session. Okay, so that's a very important part of this story because this is the kind of stuff that figure skaters, skiers, and dancers all have to put up with. All right, because those coaches, I am telling you, they are just, they're like Nazis. Okay, I mean, they're just, I had this one lady, I used to slouch once in a while. She would take a 6-inch stick that's like 3 inches around and beat me in the back with it. All right, saying, that you're slouching. Right? So given that, that's going to take us to what happened to me, I believe. Now, because of all of that training and because of all of that intensity, I just kind of gave up on my own body's clock. I gave up on my own body's needs. I gave up on my own body's initiative to stay well, and I gave up on my own body's health. Now listen to this one. Totally. And I got to the point where I started huffing and puffing in the morning, not feeling real well, and I went in the bathroom and I coughed up blood. And I ignored that. I want everybody to hear this. I completely ignored coughing up pretty good amount of blood, okay? Like maybe a quart, right? Because my lungs, it turns out, were filled with fluid. So I went back out. I did the very next jump, yeah, like that. And the world went black. Oh, buddy, the world went black. I hit the ice, broke my shoulder completely that time, hit the nose. I just can't get away from hitting my nose. I don't know what's up with that. I keep hitting my nose. I'm so glad to be retired from skating, I'm telling you. And I woke up in the hospital. All right. It turned out when I got to the hospital, I had 107-degree temperature. I had both lungs filled up with pus and blood to here, no room to breathe at all. And I had double pneumonia and I was dying. All because I didn't listen on any level to my body or my spirit. Heaven forbid I even think about that. See, the problem is that I was too busy figure skating to think about my spirit at all. I was busy beating the hell out of my body and not thinking about the interior that I needed, and not even emotionally. You were not allowed to have any emotion whatsoever in figure skating. Zero. You had to be like a machine and you had to do the next competition and you had to win it. And guess what? If you didn't win that competition, your coach yelled and screamed at you in the locker room later. Okay. So back to my hospital thing. Then they threw me in a vat of ice to bring my temperature down. And back in the 70s, they didn't know any better. That's what the procedure was for high fever. So they threw him in the vat of ice and my temperature did go down. So 98.6, and I came back out. Now, I think the crucial thing is this. What happened after that, right? The temperature went absolutely wild in just a few minutes, like within 2 probably. It went up to 109. One of the reasons that I don't have any hair right in here, one is I'm old, but the other one is that kind of temperature actually literally fried all the hair off my head. It completely fried all the hair off my head at 18 years old in 3 days, right? So in 3 days of this whole experience, it just fried it off. People need to understand that when you get that sick and you're on your way out, there's nothing glorious about it, Sabrina. Nothing. And anybody who thinks any kind of death experiences are glorious, they're crazy. All right, because there's nothing good about not taking care of your body and not taking care of your emotions and not taking care of your spirit. You have to. I want everybody to hear me clearly. You have got to take care of every part that your body, mind, and spirit is made out of. And back to my story here, I went out there. Now, I'm not going to go into all that. But what I learned out there is, one, which is wonderful, you're not alone, people. You're not alone. There's always individuals waiting for you out there that you need to hear from. Sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's higher. If you're a Christian, you're probably going to see Jesus, angels, and various other things. If you're a Buddhist, you're going to see that for sure. Or if you're whatever, a Hindu, for instance, you're going to see Shiva, because whatever your belief system is, it's there for you. The reason that people believe in a certain way is because they have that calling. They have that amazing ability. All of us as humans have an amazing ability to attract exactly the thing spiritually that matches you. And so for me, I don't care who people have as a religion, it doesn't matter. Or if they don't have one at all or whatever. The point is, what are we learning, right? So what are we learning? And I think we're all learning how to become more, don't you, Sabrina? I mean, I think we're all learning how to become more, how to be more, how to have the ability to receive all the good things that each and every one of us deserves. I really believe it. So back to the story once again, after that, I was in a hospital bed after I went through the death experience. I was in the hospital bed. I am going to mention this because I think it's important to your viewers. All right. So it goes like this. I went through the death experience. I'm laying in the bed. And all of a sudden, I did, in fact, see what I believe is probably Jesus. Okay. Probably. Now, everybody has a different opinion about who that is and what they look like or whatever. But to me, standing at the edge of the bed, this individual told me that I would have extraordinary abilities to be able to see and feel things that are of, let's call it a higher vibration, okay? And sure enough, because all of this happened to me in 1977 when I was 18, I want to reiterate that. And I've been able to really be able to help people because of that. So, when people come to see me, they immediately feel better. It's not necessarily because of anything I'm doing, but I do have a good ability to be able to be clear, and that often will help my clients to understand what they need, because all of us need something, right, Sabrina? I mean, we all need something. You know, for some people, it's companionship, right? For some people, it's the idea of how can I live more free? I don't mean free as in freeloading. I mean free, you know, free as in not having barriers, right? Not having all these barriers and ideas that we're lacking somehow. And that's what that death experience did for me, right? It allowed me to understand that one, we do have an immortality, truly. Now, obviously, we don't have one in the body. I mean, you're going to be here for so long, and that's the end of it. But you do have an immortality after it. And I believe that we have not only the whole, because I don't like to get in this too much, because it's been kind of run down, the whole, what do you call it, life after life experience or whatever. But my death experience allowed me to see that there's a bigger picture that we are, that there is a space inside here, right here, and right here, that's of a higher place. That we have the capability to be the kind of people that could be worldwide, not just nations, but worldwide united. We could be. We could be. And I feel like the more we talk about unity and the less we talk about division, the closer we're going to get to what I call godliness and or the universal ability to have one mind and one heart and everybody go in the same direction. Because I have a little saying, and the saying goes like this. We're either going to live in a world that is at peace, right? Or we're going to live in a world that's in pieces. So we're one of those two things, yeah? And I know I'm breaking away from my story, but I felt like I needed to say all these things because that's my real mission to come and talk to you. The story is kind of just a bystander to what I believe. And the story is a bystander to what we are now, yeah? Because the only real thing that matters to people is what's happening now. The story is fine, but it's not reality any longer for me. And it's not the reality for anybody listening either. It's only their story that's happening right now, right?
Yeah, and I think the big part about it is I think the story allows us to understand the lessons that you took and the impact that it's had, because it allows us, and that's my objective with having these conversations, is to tap into the wisdom that other people have achieved without, you know, the pain that they've had to go through to achieve that. And I think that's where lies a wealth of information and good advice and lessons for everybody, that we don't have to go through the trauma that you endured when you were young, but we can just learn from your message. So that's why I love that you're tying in what you've now learned and how you've ended up calling it once you've processed all the experiences together with the experiences that you've had. Because of course, afterwards, I'm pretty sure that when you were a top performer in figure skating, you had no time in those 12-hour, trainings to think of what's happening to me, or when you were in that hospital bed, you probably weren't thinking, how can I take better care of my body? You're probably thinking, how can I
thinking about how the hell am I going to get out of here?
Exactly. And will I perform as well as I did before?
Yeah, I was ready to go back on the ice the next day.
There you go.
Seriously. Right? I so much didn't get it that point you just made is everything. Even though I had the death experience and it was lovely or whatever, it didn't teach me a damn thing about how to fix it. It's like I wanted to go right back into it, right?
And before we move on to the next parts of your timeline, because you've mentioned, top performance sport, and I think it's probably similar with any sports that you do on a high level,
Yeah.
on a professional level. So whether
Yeah.
it's basketball or ballet or whatever it is a performance level sport. So you train
Yeah.
a lot. The pressure is really hard, and it also feels, from what I'm hearing from you, but also what I've read about different kinds of sports, people don't, like coaches or the team, they don't necessarily care about you as a person, but you as a performer. So it's all about what your body is able to do and how far it can be pushed. But
Mhm.
if push comes to shove or whatever happens, that there's not a lot of value placed on that, which is,
Yeah.
I tend to think that it would mess with the mind of a 19-year-old.
Yeah. So, in going into that, because I'm about ready to, right, we're going to talk about that. So I went through the death experience. Now, my lungs were damaged so much that I could no longer compete. I did not have the breath capacity to be able to continue. So my alternate way of performing was the Holiday on Ice in Europe, right? So I was in your neck of the woods, and I did that, for a long time. Well, when I first got in, uh, I had no idea what I was getting into, because when you're an amateur and you're competing, that's a schedule that's very, let's call it, loose. I mean, you might do this competition, but not that one. Where in the figure skating show, you have 5 shows a day, you have 7 days a week, and you have 10 months a year. And you will do exactly as they tell you to. And, we had a saying in the show, went like this: hey, as long as I look great on the outside, it doesn't matter what the inside's doing. So you would have lots of injured kids. You would have lots of sick kids. You would have lots of stressed kids, because we were all between 18 and 25. And what that equals is a mess, okay? Because you had people like partying all night long, you had people drugging all night long, you had people having sex all night long, you had people jumping out of 20-story windows with bottles of champagne. I mean, you have just ridiculous things happening because of the stress level that the show is putting on you, right? And here you are, 10 months a year of that. You have no choice whatsoever. So I endured that for about 10 years or so. And I decided, well, I don't know that I want to continue that type of lifestyle. In the meantime, while I was in that situation, which we traveled the entire continent of Europe, I decided on something different. So, because I kept having this negative, or not negative, I kept having this feeling of a higher self that wanted to come through. And I was frustrated because skating shows are not the place to display that, even though I did do a few little things with it, kind of talking to other skaters about my death experience, because a lot of them wanted to know about it. Matter of fact, I ended up telling the whole show, actually. But a lot of them laughed at me. So you have to understand that. A lot of people think that, especially in figure skating where everybody's tough, that's BS, and all that's whatever. And he's got a good story because he wants people to hear it or whatever. So it just wasn't an opening for that. So I got out of that show and I started teaching figure skating. And that's a different level. And I thought, I think my death experience has made me tend to want to help others. And that was really 1990 something. I'm not real good with dates. Sorry, everybody. And so I was teaching in, I believe I was teaching in Los Angeles. Okay. So I was teaching in Los Angeles, 4 different ice arenas, and I had 550 skating students or something like that. There I am again, 7 days a week, working from 3:30 in the morning till about 7 or 8 at night or something. So I'm almost at the same level as I was in the show, except that when you're teaching, you have choice. You can take less students or more students. You can work on a Wednesday, but not on a Thursday or whatever. And I decided to run a little ad in the newspaper because, you know, there was a time without computers, if people get that. And the ad just simply said counselor, right? Didn't say anything else. It just said counselor and my name and a phone number. And I started having people show up. So I started talking to them about various issues and whatever. I'm not a psychologist or any of that. So it was working. And I think I had something like, I don't know, a massage therapy license or whatever. But, you know, I had some basic little license thing for California. Now, California's not like that anymore. You got to have all of this in order to even get anywhere near anybody. Okay. But back then it wasn't like that. So I was working with people on the side, teaching figure skating the rest of the time. And I was roommating with some people from Yugoslavia. Now, I'm not going to give any names and I'm not going to go into that because this is a really harrowing story and I don't want to get into it too much. But these people seem to be a little bit odd, and I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to that because I was so concentrated on helping others and doing my figure skating, and I wasn't thinking about that. And so they said, hey, let's all go on this vacation. So I wasn't thinking anything about it, and we all jumped in their car and we were going on this vacation. Long story short, we went out to a place called Palmdale, which is desert, and they hit me on the back of the head once we got out there with a .45 pistol and knocked me on the ground and said they were kidnapping me. Now, my parents had a lot of money. I mentioned that earlier. And they had kidnapped me for the ransom. So basically what happened there is they were some kind of black cultists, witches, or whatever you want to call it. And they painted my whole head and face with green paint. They walked me around backwards in some kind of ridiculous witches ceremony of some type. And they put the gun to my head and they said, hey, you know, we're going to ask for whatever amount of money it was. And they tied me to a cactus in 118-degree heat. And long story short, they left me there to die. So an interesting thing happened, which I am not going to go around this one because it's important. So after they left me there in order to go get their money, an angel came. And I need to say it, right? I just feel like I need to say this one. An angel came who I believe is probably Michael or one of those, and said, crawl. So I was, you know, handcuffed to the cactus, and I managed to get loose from that by kind of shimmying up the cactus because it was like a barrel cactus, not a big one. And I got loose. By the way, I had about 15,000 thorns in my back from that one. And so I got loose and I put my hands over my head and got my arms in front with the handcuffs on. I crawled. Somebody told me later it was 3.5 miles to the road, to the highway. And pretty soon, you know, a bystander came by in a car and they rescued me. Then they got the fire department and they got the police. And I ended up in the Palmdale hospital for recovery. Here we go again, right, with another story in which most people probably would not have recovered from that with any kind of mental wherewithal. They probably would have been nuts. I found out later that a lot of people that do get kidnapped and do go through violence like that, they never recover from it. So what I believe happened to me in the first death experience, right, allowed me to recover, and because I started counseling people in between those things. What I want to say to people is, regardless of what your trauma is, I don't care if it's mental, physical, or spiritual, you can get through it. And the way to get through it is to go get help. Don't wait to go get help when you've been victimized by something, someone, whatever. Don't wait. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. Don't wait on getting counseling. Don't wait on getting physical help. Don't wait on getting physical therapy and other things that could help you, survive, in my case, a terrible kidnapping. I mean, they had to pick the thorns out. That took 3 days. I was dehydrated to the point of almost death. I was mentally, emotionally shattered. And my trust in humans was gone. And I had to crawl through all those stages in order to get back up and running again. And that took me about 5 years, right? So it took me about 5 years.
I can imagine. And one thing that I want to say to this, so thinking back on almost your whole life story, right? So you're born into a family and you're going through a lot of abuse, and then you're competing in this sport, and it seems like everybody just cares about your performance. So it would be easy to have the mindset of, people don't really care about me, they just care about what I can do for them, or what I can be in their show or in that competition. So your sense of ego would definitely take a toll. Now you're going through that first death experience, the second one. How do you end up asking for help and accepting help? Because it seems that a lot of the people that you were around for most of your life didn't necessarily want you to be okay or you as a person to succeed, but
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
they just needed something from you or needed you to perform in a certain way. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you go from, nobody sees me, it's just what I can do to them, to, oh my God, my mind's a mess and I actually need to take those steps to recover and to be a decent human being? Because you could go down the road of being a horrible human being with
After
no
that, sure.
trust
Especially
in,
after the kidnapping.
there
Yeah.
you go, you've lost
Uh-huh.
trust in human beings, rightfully
Mm-hmm.
so. So it's very easy to just do despicable things and to be an awful person.
You
So what
know,
was your mindset at that point?
I mean, that's a really good question. And how did I keep from being, I don't know, a drug dealer or whatever, or a violent person myself after that, and thinking everybody's my enemy, right? So I did find out from other kidnapping victims later that about 50% of them do turn violent. Or they turn self-destructive, or they won't talk anymore, or they go through one marriage after another and things like that. So the way I work that out is I took some time to really think about this thing, right? Really think about this thing. And long story short there, and remember, I was still in Los Angeles, okay? So I decided to move from the rinks that I was teaching in to a different set of ice arenas, which were in a place called Redlands, okay, which is kind of at the bottom of a mountain called Mount Baldy, right? So I started teaching in this tiny little rink. So to answer the first question, the way I came crawling out of the hole of that kidnapping was I had a job in which I was teaching children, right? So children are not threatening. Children are innocent. Children look up to you. Children trust you. Children know that if you're, if they're in your skating class, it's going to be all right. If they get hurt, you pick them up, you wipe them off, and you continue to go. And unlike other coaches, because of my experience of those real hard ass coaches, I didn't want to be that. So I was a lot more gentle. I was a lot more patient. And because of all my death things and the kidnapping thing and all of that, I went the other way. And I became a very, very gentle person. And so I had about maybe 300, 350, 350 skating students between the age of about 2 years old and about 14. So I was developing all those kids from classes to private lessons, because people ask me about that. How does it work? You go from classes to private lessons to competition. That's how it works. And I started doing that over there. And the question you asked was, how did I put it together? How did I put it together? Well, the way I chose to do that is I heard about a Buddhist temple that was at the top of Mount Baldy, and I think it's at 10,000 feet or whatever. And I decided to go there. And so I went there on a Saturday, and I knocked on the gate, and it's like, there's nobody there. And I stood there and I waited for about an hour. And finally I heard like these little footsteps. I'll never forget it. It's like it was yesterday, right? And this little bitty monk opens this gate and he looks at me and he goes, it's you. And I go, what? You know? And he goes, yeah, come on in. So I go in and I sit down and he says to me, I think you need to be here. Now, he's never seen me ever in his life. Doesn't know me at all. Doesn't know me from Adam. And I felt this overwhelming sense of belonging, right? Like I had never felt in my entire life. And I went, yeah, that's where I belong. So I said, I'll be back. And I went down to the skating rink and I quit. And I put all my other skating people with other coaches. I had a boss that was really pissed. So he was really mad. But I told him, I said, look, I'll be back in 1 year's time. I'll be back in 1 year's time. And I just instinctively knew it. It's like I knew I needed that year. So I gave up all my material belongings. I mean, everything. I gave all the monks, I gave my car up, I gave my clothes up, I gave all my money up, which is considerable. I was making $100 an hour times 12 hours a day. And I went there. And the first job they gave me was a greeter. And I'm like, what's that? And he says, well, you're going to sit where I was sitting at the front gate, and you are going to vet people as they come through the gate. And you, not us, you get to decide who gets in and who doesn't. Like, and of course that pushed right up against all my privacy stuff and right up against my fear about the kidnapping and right up against my fear about dealing with people at all, because I thought I was going to go there and disappear. Wrong. Okay. So it ended up being way more interaction because check this out. Now, this place is in the middle of nowhere. It's at 10,000 feet, and 10 months a year it's full of snow. And yet 12 to maybe 25 people a day would show up. That's how many people wanted to get in this monastery because they too were looking for a different way of life. But here's what I discovered about that one. There was two kinds of people. There's the kinds of people that want to just escape, if you follow that one. Yeah? And all they wanted to do is just get away from what they were already trying to escape from. And then there's the kind of people who truly and honestly have a mission. And what I realized is I was the second one. That I really honestly had a spiritual mission that I was embarking on by being in the monastery and developing the interior. That doesn't mean let the exterior go, because people think that about Buddhist monks. They don't let anything go. They have plenty of food. They have plenty of clothing. They're warm. They're cared for. As a matter of fact, they're 10 times more cared for than, 3/4 of people in America, pretty much. Okay. So there were things I had to do, though, which I'll point out. One of the things I had to do is, without any clothing on, you had to train your mind so well to be clear that you had to sit in the snow and do an 8.5-hour meditation. Now, the first, I don't know, 25 times I tried that one, I got frostbite. All right. So it took a very long time to train myself to get past that. You had to do 200 push-ups a day on your fingertips. We went on these like 70-mile runs around their property in a snowstorm, barefooted. So, I mean, there was a lot of things that were not on any level easy. But what I discovered through that year was I had myself meet myself, if that makes sense. I had the interior self meet the exterior self, and I was able to put them together. And at the end of that year, all my stress from all the things that I told you that I've been through were gone. They were all gone.
I love how you said you had to meet yourself and the exterior had to meet the interior. I want to really drive this point home for everybody listening, just in case there's anybody that's a bit fuzzy on what we mean by that. Would you mind going a bit deeper into what you mean by meeting yourself?
Well, when I first went to the monastery, everything I was doing was exterior. In other words, I was teaching skating, I was involved in skating, and I only thought about skating, and I used skating to mask my stress from the kidnapping. So in other words, I wasn't getting any better. I was just as stressed as if the kidnapping had happened the day before, even though it was years later. And I knew it. Okay, I knew that. And I'm like, I can't keep living this way, because I started doing things like drinking and staying out late and going through a lot of girlfriends without hardly any substance to that, and various other things. I knew I was unhealthy. I knew that I was heading for a train wreck. So I had to do something about that. I had to do something about it. So in my case, I realized what I did is an extreme cure. I understand that. And it's definitely, I don't want anybody to think that that's a thing for them. I don't want anybody to think that a Buddhist monastery is like the answer to everything. And it wasn't for me either. But what it did do for me is it allowed me to let go of the idea that somehow I was to blame for the kidnapping. And I didn't realize I was doing that. I was actually blaming myself for some kind of weird weakness that I might have had to allow myself to be kidnapped by some vicious people. I thought I was the person that created that, when in fact, I wasn't at all. I was just a victim, right? And one of the first things that the Buddhist monks taught me, right, because we would have meditations all the time, and we would have these counseling sessions, which I didn't say, which were about 2 hours a day, about how are you doing, what's going on, what can we do for you, what can you do for us, how can we serve each other. And what happened in those sessions with the monks is that I was able to go through the entire kidnapping and release every evil thing that had to do with it. Now, I want to talk just for a second about karma. Okay? So, and I'm going to tell you what happened to the people that did that. So, they went back to Yugoslavia, and that happened to be right in those years where there was the Serbian wars. It just so happened that their town got leveled and they were all killed. Every single one. So what I'm saying is karma will bite you. And if you do violent things to people, violent things happen to you. So you have to be very careful how you operate on this planet, because everything you do has a cost. And you want to make sure that that cost doesn't get too high.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure that your behavior is one of the most pure that you can deliver in order to have good results in your life.
Now, Adam, I have probably the weirdest question. You'll tell me afterwards if you think.
Okay, sure.
When you heard about the village being burned down,
Yeah.
and these people that did this awful thing to you, something that you at the time you weren't sure that you will recover from or not, how did you feel? Did it give you any joy or pleasure, or did you feel vindicated? Did it help in any way release the trauma that you were feeling?
Let me explain that. So that whole thing happened the year I was in the monastery. So I didn't hear about it. I didn't know anything about it. So let's go with after I got out then. So after I got out of the monastery, I did go back to that rink, and I, regained my job, and I started teaching, and I was like this free man. I felt like I was this other dude. I felt like I was this new guy. I felt like I went from crawling along the ground to soaring. I mean, wow. 1 year in that monastery changed everything. So then I heard the story that we're talking about the village, right? And I had a really interesting reaction to it. I went in my interior self to see if, was this real or was it Memorex? That's kind of an old commercial we used to have, right? Was it real or fake? Was I reacting in some kind of reality, or was I just acting out? And I discovered that my reaction to this was real. And what I said to myself was, and now let it be. And that was the only reaction I had. I didn't have a feeling either way about what did or didn't happen. I didn't have any feeling about how it happened or why or with whom or whatever. And I mean, my mother was calling me and telling me, hey, because I hadn't talked to her in a year. So, she was saying, hey, you know about this. And of course, obviously her reaction was slightly different. She's like, those are, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like, Mom, they paid with their lives, Mom. I didn't pay with mine, but they did. I said, Mom, what more can you ask for a terrible deed than that kind of payment? You can't ask for anything else. Somebody paid with their life. Yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. So, no, I didn't feel vindicated. No, I didn't feel like that's awesome or any of those things. I just said, and let it be. Because in the monastery, what I learned is that everything on this planet is one thing in particular. It's superficial and it's temporary. And we're only going to be here so long. We come in naked and we go out naked. We don't take our job. We don't take our stuff. I mean, I heard about this guy in Hollywood that buried himself with his Ferrari. How ridiculous is that? Okay. I mean, that's what I mean. We don't take anything but what we learn. That's what we take. Want me to continue the story now?
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing that is just my opinion here, but I think your reaction to what happened to these people is the one sign that you healed, and that you solved, that you healed that trauma in yourself. Because I think often enough, I mean, so many people go through different kinds of abuse, and almost never do you get to hear about what happened to the abuser. And I
No.
think a lot of people would think that if there was some sort of like karmic payback or a revenge, they would feel better about it.
Sure.
And that's just something that's keeping you reliving that awful experience.
Hmm.
And I think the sign that you healed is just being able to let this go, and not, just like you hear something on the news, it's something that no longer resonates with you because you have healed that trauma. So that's what I wanted to point out, in case anybody who's watching is going through their own trauma that they need to resolve.
Yeah, and that's why I'm going through every single thing that's dark, nasty, whatever, on your show today, because if you can understand that even when like multiple things happened to me, right? So it wasn't just one thing. I mean, it was a whole bunch of really terrible stuff. And the point is that when you're looking for a solution rather than a problem all the time, then you have an important word, and the word is hope. Right? You have the hope in the idea that you are going to generate something in your future that does not allow you to attract that stuff. Right? And the only way that you're not going to have things happen is you got to clear up in here. Okay? Because the more you are clear inside, the less this stuff is going to happen to you. Because we really do generate our own world with what we attract. So you want to go on the story? So to go on further with the story, after all of that, I was still working figure skating, and let's see, I moved to San Diego, and then I was teaching there, and that actually ended up being really good because I was doing half work with people on spiritual, emotional, and physical things, and I was also teaching figure skating with little kids. I love kids. I'm absolutely in love with them. They're wonderful. I also have 3 children, right? So I have a girl and 2 boys, and they're little. I'm kind of an old daddy, but anyway, I'm sort of an old everything. But anyway, so after that, I kept teaching and kept going, which, let's just bring it up to, well, are you guys ready for this? My wife's name is Eve. My name's Adam. So it's like, yeah, it's Adam and Eve. Yeah, I know. So I'm sure you're going to have people make comments about that one. Okay. So I met Eve 14 years ago. And I was working at that point. I was no longer figure skating. I did retire from figure skating in San Diego. I think it was 2000. And I didn't skate anymore. And I just worked with people up until the time I met Eve. And that's 14 years ago, to kind of catch everybody up. And so I was working in Lake Tahoe, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I worked there for a long time, way before I met Eve. And I had a good clientele. I was doing really well. I was working 6 days a week. I think I was working on about 12 to 16 people a day, something like that. And I was very, very happy with that. So I met Eve, and she started working with me. Actually, she was a client, right? So she first came to me for some things because Eve is a Lithuanian, and she went through that whole awful migration garbage with the Russians. We know about those people. And, so she had that story. Okay. So when she came to me, she was damaged from that. And she also had a Russian husband that was just a pain in the ass. See that? And that's a good example of how she attracted the very thing that she couldn't stand. Right. So there you go. So she left him. She got together with me. We're working along, and everything is doing pretty darn well into about 5 years of that. And all of a sudden, I had this like pain down below. Didn't quite know what that was. So takes me to the hospital. boom, man, I hit face first in the ER. And this is not one I talked to you about. So this is new to you. And so I woke up and I was kind of staggering around the ER, and the doctor goes, "Are you drunk?" I'm like, "No, I'm in pain. Do you mind?" And he figured it out. It turned out that I had kidney stones that were about that size, and I had 4 of them. So in the operating room again, and they did a 4-hour thing with that, and that was kind of intense. I got through that one. And then about 4.5 years ago, I had another problem in which, sure enough, hit the floor again, except this time I had a pulmonary embolism, which is also known as a blood clot, which is right next to my heart right here. That time I died on the table 4 times. So they had to actually bring me back 4 times. Now, people are always asking me, okay, well, if you're supposed to be cleared up, or you're supposed to be, all omnipotent, and you're supposed to be this great counselor, and you're supposed to be all these things, why do you continue to have them, right? Isn't that a great question, right? And I get that question a lot. Here's the answer. Am I human? Yeah, probably. Am I faulted? Yep, probably. If you're in a human body, you're going to be faulted. And do I make mistakes? Absolutely. And do I take care of my body? Not always, because you got to remember what I came from. Okay. So I was overworking and this and that, same stuff again. Okay. So I went out there and I came back, and what I came back with is the knowledge, 1, that I needed to quit for a few years, and 2, that I needed to pay attention to my children, because I wasn't the greatest father, and I admit it. I wasn't the greatest husband, and I admit that. But what I got when I came back from that was I learned how to be a husband. I learned how to be a father. And I learned how to take care of myself much better. I used to drink and this stuff. I haven't had a drink in 5 years or something like that. And I'm not interested. I don't smoke. I don't take drugs. I don't believe in any of that stuff. And these days I'm, back at work, right? And I'm working with Discover Wholeness, which is our company, and we're doing a whole bunch of things. We got these experiences where you can come see us one-on-one. We got these other things where we do live events, and then we got all the computer. We do these 4-week courses. So, I feel like I finally, at 65 freaking years old, I'm finally getting a grip on what it takes to actually take care of this, because I was so great at taking care of everybody else, and that's what we're doing. If you don't have unity between your body, your mind, and your spirit, you have a divide in there, which I think is reflected in the world at this point, right? Everybody's so divided, left, right, middle, whatever. Okay. And I think that we can come together. That's my message today. My real message is we can come together as humans, not as countries, not as politics, not as whatever your skin color is, or your socioeconomic status, or whatever else, your material objects. It's like, get over it. What we want to do now is bring everybody together with one heart, one mind, and one spirit.
So how do you guys do that? Because you told me that you have this company, but why do you, and you see a lot of people that come to see you for different things. What are the issues that people struggle with the most that they come to you with?
It used to be more like, let's say, 8-9 years ago, before the whole politics garbage, they would come to me with physical problems, right? Where now they're coming to me with separation problems, where they're feeling divided on the outside because of whatever media says, whatever they say. And they're feeling divided on the inside because half of their family, let's say, is right-wingers, half their family's like left-wingers, right? And they can't even get together for Thanksgiving and then agree on turkey. So they come to me with this frazzled, fragmented split, right? So what even I end up talking to them about now these days is how to develop unity with themselves, how to develop, a system in which they can go, okay, well, we're going to start from the letter A and then go B, C, D in very basic nuts and bolts ideas and ways so that we can coach them in the understanding that they really were born with everything they ever needed. They really came here complete. They came here whole. And the earth and all it's going on, and all its stuff has nothing to do with who and what they actually are. And we are very good at getting them to be able to join that part of themselves again, that unity that they came with in the first place before they got taught out of it. So that's what we do over there.
Am I right in saying that what you do is helping people unlearn a lot of the behaviors that we learn today through society, that you need to chase certain jobs and promotions, and you need to be in a certain place, that your family life needs to look a certain way, and everything almost needs to be perfect, and if it's not, then you're slipping away and you're at fault for it not being perfect. And it seems like we're never really, I don't really like the word happiness because I feel like it's very elusive, but I like saying content because I think content is something that's an inner peace that you get. So, and that's something that I believe you achieve when you're truly at peace with yourself. When you go to bed, you know that, you're a good human being. You've done what you could do. You've done your best today. You've worked at the things that needed work. And then you feel like you've paid your dues for the day almost. That's how I look at it. And I see contentment as what I strive for and what I think is healthy to strive for, as opposed to happiness, which it feels like the more you pursue it, the more, the goalpost just changes, and it's the next 100K or the next house or the next, I don't know, car. And it feels like you need to unlearn some of the behaviors that sometimes were taught as a child, like in your case, the performance and that you needed to perform a certain way. And I could imagine you were going through, you were probably taught at that point that you had to perform a certain way to be seen and to be valid as a human being, which is probably for a child very unhealthy to learn that.
100%. It got me dead a few times.
There you go.
Got me dead a few times. And along the lines of what you're talking about there, in America, what happens, and I think it happens worldwide really, but especially here, one of the things that happens here is everybody is so busy trying to be comfortable, right? They will avoid, I'm not kidding, everything and put their head in the sand in order to be comfortable, right? They could have weeds growing in their front yard, for instance, right? And if they don't think that those weeds are any kind of detriment to their yard, regardless of everybody complaining about homeowners associations and this and that and fines or whatever, they're not going to cut them because they're more comfortable sitting in front of the television and being a couch potato as their health is going down. Okay. And there's a huge difference between being comfortable, right, which is avoiding life, and being happy, which means being in life and involved with it, right? And that's what we work on over here, to get people to actually get their head out of the sand and start to do something in which they're active and happy. And, there's other things that go along with it. If you're active and happy, you're going to feel like you're appreciated all of a sudden. If you are communicating and if you are doing things that are positive with yourself, your neighbor, and your world, then you're going to feel like you're worthwhile. And that's the point. It's like once you get into a productive lifestyle in which you care about yourself, which means you care about others, because if you don't care about yourself, nobody's going to care about you. You have to love this. You have to love this, no matter what this is. I mean, look at me. I'm kind of a balding old guy. But, or I should say, and I really love myself, and I love where I am now more than I ever did. Check this out. When I was at the top of figure skating, making like $10,000 a month in 1978, which is like $100,000 in American money, right? And the furs and the Rolexes and the ladies and the whatever else. I didn't like myself. I didn't know I didn't, but I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because I was trained into the idea that if you pound yourself hard enough and long enough, you're going to end up, like you were saying, with that extra 150K or whatever it is that you're trying to earn. Of course, 150K is nothing now, 100 million maybe. And is that going to make you any more or any better on any level? No, it's temporary. Yeah, it pays the bills. I totally get that. You have to pay bills. I have to pay bills. Everybody has to. But how much is too much, right? And once you get too much, what happens with people is then they want that next level of too much. You've ever noticed that? People that have hundreds of millions of dollars, they don't think they have enough. It's like they got to have the next level and the next level and the next thing and the next yacht and the next house and whatever else. And pretty soon you're busy filling a hole from the outside in. And what Eve and I do with people is get them to stop all that crazy stuff and get them to understand that you have to do things from the interior. And then what happens on the outside is pretty doggone glorious, I've noticed. Pretty good. Yeah.
Now, Adam, I wanted to go on a bit of a detour because I feel like there's still some parts of your experience at the Buddhist temple that you haven't shared with us. Do you still want to talk about that?
Oh, sure.
And then I also have a question that I think will set you up for that, because you mentioned doing a lot of physical exercise when you were there. But it wasn't just intense physical exercise, it was in, how would you call it? Sorry, it's nighttime here, so my brain is just slowly shutting down.
So I'll help you out with that. The physical exercise
Yeah,
was in the context of spiritualism.
that's
So
what I want to understand. Like, how do you use physical exercise to train the mind?
So it's the other way around. So the way it works is let's start when I first got there. Okay, so when I first got there, there's no way I can run 20 feet barefooted in the snow. Forget it. Much less miles. So what happened? Right? What happened? I spent many, many, many days, long hours first in the temple with my holy self that I had come in contact with in the first death experience, because I could still see it, in combination with the Buddhist belief and ideas, to be able to still this, to be able to understand that whatever I was doing with the body was going to be safe, was going to be normal, and was going to not have any negative consequences, regardless of how strenuous it may or may not be. So I spent all this time learning how to still the mind, still the mind, still the mind, still the mind. One of the things they did, which is a really interesting exercise, and I would tell anybody to try this. It's very simple. You go outside in a park or whatever. That's usually where the trees are. Okay. And you pick a point on the tree that all you're going to do is just look at it. And the object is to clear your mind of anything else that's going on around the tree or in the park or on the road or with the people walking by or any other thing. And see how long you can actually focus on that one spot on this tree. I'm just using the tree as a metaphor. Okay? In my case, it was in a field behind the monastery, and there was a statue of the great Buddha Law, who I love and cherish. And how long could I concentrate on the Buddha itself? Because things would happen. Here's a good example. So a bird would land on it, or a bird would fly by. And the reason that that exercise is really difficult is because when you first start, anybody that's going to try this, when you first start, what you're going to find out is that your mind goes blip and your concentration's gone. Okay. You saw the bird, you saw the person in the parking lot, you saw the whatever and whoever. But by about 3 months of that, I could actually concentrate on just the Buddha statue itself, and I did not hear anything. I did not see anything. I did not feel anything that wasn't of the holy being. So then, when I went to do exercises or I went to do whatever else, in the snow, in the cold, I didn't feel anything but the holiness and warmth inside. And that's how I did all the physical feats that were required of me after I was there for 3 months, because they actually had requirements and classes and things that you had to do while you were there in order to stay there, including you had a job. I told you I was a greeter. So that's how I centered myself to a point of indestructibility as far as the cold was concerned, or as far as injuries. Now, that didn't mean that I didn't get injured, because I did doing those runs, right? And I did during the, I got frostbite a bunch of times when I first started meditating in the snow. It took a long time to be able to get out of that. There's nothing easy about learning holy ways. It's difficult. It's hard. It takes your whole life. I'm just telling everybody that. You know, you're not going to come to Discover Holiness, or you're not going to come to Sabrina, or you're not going to come to whoever or whatever and expect like that. There's nothing fast about learning how to be a holy person. It takes all your life and then some. And then some. So what I'm saying is, if you dedicate your life to a holy way of living and being, expect it to be work. Expect it to take a lot of time. Expect it to take a lot of education. And in some cases, it will take maybe your life savings or whatever else. See, it took my life savings. It took my lifetime. You got to remember this. When I went to the Buddhist monastery, I want to go back through that. I gave them everything. My car, my money, everything. And they gave me one thing. They gave me one thing. You know what that was? They gave me basically this sort of tunic that I had to wear every day. And by the way, I had to clean it myself. Okay. I had to make my own food from scratch and various other very difficult things for a spoiled American like myself that was used to going to the store and just buying whatever and having lots of money and having whatever. I had to go from that to nothing. Now, I'm not saying that I'm expecting any of our viewers here to do any of those things. I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is find the way or ways that are comfortable for you in order to become a more holy and sacred and caring person. Check this out, about this. About caring about your own structure, your own self, interior, exterior, whatever. and be able to come in line with spirit enough to where you can finally say, hey, I've arrived at least in a place where I feel home, where I feel satisfied, where I feel happy, and where I can operate in a world that works. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And I think there's so much that, at least that I've taken away from it, and I think everybody watching has taken a lot away from it. And I want to thank you for being raw and vulnerable and sharing the things that are maybe not so fun to share with us, because I think that's where growth happens. And it just, the fact that you're sitting here and you're teaching people how to connect with themselves and how to feel whole after the whole journey that you've taken us through, that your life is just nothing short of impressive. And I often say, if I had your challenges or roadblocks, I don't know that I would be half the person you are today. So I don't know if you're
you wouldn't be half as old. Okay, so there's that. All right, but I'm going to say something about that. All right, I'm sorry I stopped you there.
Yeah, go for it.
But I need to say something about that. Yes, you would, Sabrina. Yes, you would. Do you know why?
Yeah.
Because regardless of whatever hellish crap happens to any of us, if you think about it, we have two choices. Yeah. One, to keep living and do something with it, or to die. So the truth is, yes, you would.